Welcome back to the 330 Project as we are starting our third episode. At the first episode, we talked about how less is greater than more. The second episode, we talked about how insecurities are less than our calling. And today, we're going to talk about how inside the home, our impact inside the home is greater than or more important than outside the home. In order to illustrate this, I want to share a story of being recently able to go to a friend's 40th birthday party who's he and his wife are both pastors at their church. And we had a great dinner, beautiful location. And after dinner, unbeknownst to us guests, his wife asked if each of us would share maybe a first memory or something that stands out to us about him. And so we're all able to share, and it's so encouraging to hear people talk about his leadership, talk about his love for the Lord, talk about his friendship or his ability to be a great brother. And so Steph and I shared different things as well. But what was really impactful for me and really struck a chord with me near the end was when his wife talked about him and was saying, "You are the same at home as you are on stage. That you are the same on the platform and at home." And the reason that's so important is because we hear about stories of leaders, specifically, sadly, we hear about Christian leaders who have these incredible ministries and they're well known and they do great things and they have a great impact on the world. And yet something is, for some of them, right, not all of them, but we find out at certain circumstances that something wasn't right inside the home. That it's really easy for us to put on a mask or to put on a persona, to play a part in the role of churchgoer or leader, rather than allowing God to work in from the inside out to make sure that if God is working in our hearts, then that's going to overflow to inside our home as well as outside our home. The question that we're going to land on is, what good is it for a leader to impact the world and yet lose the ministry inside the home? In 1 Samuel 2, we see the story of Eli. Eli was the high priest in ancient Israel, and so he had a really important job in regards to ministering to the families, receiving their offerings so that they could be made right with God at the tabernacle. So his role was really important, and he was the high priest, so he was the one in charge. And we learn in 1 Samuel 2 that his sons were wicked sons. They did not follow the ways of the Lord. They went and they were selfish and they took advantage of their role as a priest. That for me as a pastor, this is the idea of pastors' kids who, the pastor may have this huge ministry, but if pastors' kids are those who they fall away from the Lord, they don't see faith lived out and therefore they don't pursue it, then what good is it for a worldwide impact ministry and yet to forfeit the ministry inside the home? In fact, C.H. Spurgeon talks about the idea that sometimes the greatest impact we can have on the kingdom of God is to raise godly kids in order to let the generations continue to grow in him. Moses talks about it in Deuteronomy 6 when he talks about how we ought to love the Lord our God, for he is one, and that we are to talk about him often with our children. I know some of you may not have children, some of you aren't married, some of you are in different life stages, maybe some of you have grandchildren. Whatever life stage you're in, as we've been saying throughout this series over the past few weeks, everyone is a leader to someone, so we should aim to be a good one. And one of the ways we can aim to be a good, godly leader is to talk about our faith with those closest to us in our home, and to be the same people inside the home as we are outside the home. Because the first ones who will see the disconnect are those inside the home. So if we act one way in front of people at church or small groups or things like that, and then we act completely different at home, they're the ones that will sniff it out, and they're the ones that will be most impacted negatively by our incongruency or our lack of integrity to do what we say we're going to do. And so as we close, I just want to encourage you, if we ask ourselves, what good is it for a leader to impact the world and yet forfeit the ministry of home? My question for you is, where is your focus in regards to who you're ministering to? As a different friend of mine once said, that he acknowledges he's the senior pastor of his home. That is his first church. That is his first community that he's in charge of. And so in whatever role you're in, whatever capacity you're in, whoever it is that you are leading, in order to be a good leader, a godly leader, we live out what we're going to say. And we recognize that through that, lives will be changed, yes, outside the home, but it has to start inside and then ripple from there. Because if we do that, well, then we'll be more like Hannah, who we see in this story, who prayed for her son Samuel. And Samuel came, and he had an incredible impact because she prayed for him. She sought God for him. And while he was being weaned, she poured into him, and she sent him to learn under Eli. And so we see the contrast in this chapter of Eli's wicked son and Hannah's godly one. And one of the things Samuel does is whenever God speaks, he said, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." What is God speaking to you about today in regards to where your greatest ministry is? Are your eyes so fixed on outside the home that you're forgetting, that we are forgetting, to minister inside the home first and foremost? Because again, the question begs itself, what good is it for a leader to impact the world and yet lose the ministry inside their home? We hope that this was encouraging, but maybe this one was a little bit more challenging of a message as well. And yet we know that when we are challenged, we could turn to God and he can mold us and shape us and break us and create us into his new image. And so my hope and prayer is that all of us, you, me, anyone who's watching, will someday be able to be in a celebration with family and friends. And that they, like my friend, will be able to hear the words, "You are the same outside the home and inside the home. And because of that, you love God and love people well." Thank you all so much for joining us. We look forward to continuing our series at the 330 Project. Again, feel free to like, to subscribe, and to be part of our community. We hope that this encourages and challenges you. Have a good rest of your week. And thank you again for taking some time with us today.